Hello, my name is Jarrod Fairclough.
And my name is Joe Hennis.
And welcome to Introduce Our Guest Star, a Muppet fan podcast for toughpigs.com. In this show, Joe and I were taking it in turns to surprise each other with each week's guests. This week it's my turn, Joe, because you were last week. That's how it works.
That is how it works. We have a whole system here.
We have a whole system. So, Joe, you get to ask a few questions, as you know.
All right,
try to figure out who it is. Do it,
man. Let's jump in feet first. All right, Henson, Muppets, or Sesame?
Sesame.
Ooh, a Sesame person. Is this person a puppeteer?
No.
Ooh.
Ooh.
That could be anybody. Has this person ever worked at Hooper's store?
No.
Okay. Are you sure?
Yes, it's Natalie Portman.
Dressed as an
elephant. No, they have not. Dressed as an elephant.
Alrighty. That's neat. Has this person ever sung a song on Sesame Street?
No.
Wow. All right. I'm going to guess it's not a performer. Is this person a writer?
No.
Wow. A lot of no's here.
Yeah, come on.
Boy, yeah, I'm coming up blank. Okay. Is this person a puppet builder?
No.
Wow. What else is there?
I don't know. It's actually someone who's not connected to anything. It's actually just my dad.
It's your dad.
Yeah.
Not gonna lie, I really thought of bringing in your dad as a guest. I thought that would have been hysterical.
Go for it.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna make a wild guess. I really was hoping I could get them all, but I'm not gonna get this one. Okay, so someone who's not a puppeteer, probably not a performer, not a writer. I'm gonna guess that it's Sesame Workshop CEO Steve Youngwood.
Incorrect. Joe, my guest today, is an Emmy-nominated director who has worked with some of the biggest names in show business. I'm talking Robin Williams, Robert Redford, Bryan Cranston, Gary Shandling, Steve Carell, Scarlett Johansson. You name them, he's directed them. He also directed shows like Freaks and Geeks, Malcolm in the Middle, Santa Clarita Diet, Parks and Rec, Space Force, and he helped create The Larry Sanders Show, The Bernie Mac Show, and the American adaptation of a little show you may have heard of called The Office. You're looking super confused because you still haven't figured it out. But long before he did any of that, he directed Big Bird, Oscar, Cookie Monster, and Daddy Dodo in the 1985 film Follow That Bird. Joe, would you please welcome to introduce our guest, Follow That Bird director Ken Kwapis. Hello, Ken.
Hey.
Hey, Ken.
Joe.
Great to meet you. I'm Joe.
Hey, Joe.
I'm Jarrod.
I'm Jarrod.
Hey, Jarrod. Great to meet both of you. Can you see and hear me? Can you see and hear me okay?
We can see and hear you perfectly.
Fantastic. Well, thank you.
Thank you. So the concept of the show is Joe didn't know you were coming until literally about 90 seconds ago. And we've done 15 of these now, and that is the most excited I've seen Joe.
Yeah. Genuinely jazzed to talk to you. Because I was telling Jarrod just before you came on, Follow That Bird to me is, it's a perfect movie. I adore that film. It's a huge part of Sesame Street history, obviously. And, we've been doing Tough Pigs for many, many years, our Muppet fan site. And we've always said one of these days, we really got to get in touch with Ken Kwapis. We really got to talk to him about this movie. And we've just never gone through the motions to actually reach out to you. So I'm just tickled that we finally get this chance to talk to you about this fantastic film.
I'm psyched. I will say in advance that I may be interrupted by a dog that's going to walk into this room and curl up on the couch. That's all.
Even better. Yeah, all the best Zoom conversations involve a dog making a surprise appearance.
You are welcome to excise any of that you would like. So any ground rules that I need to know about?
No. Whatever you want to talk about, let's talk about.
Yeah, swear your head off if you want. Who cares?
Yeah, I'll bleep it. It's fine.
Well, I'm happy to go back to the beginning. I mean, I don't know if you've done if you focused much on Sesame Street, or have you?
Yeah, we
Sure you've
focus
done
a lot on
it.
Sesame Street, equally with Muppets and all the Henson different Henson projects and all that. It's still a very big part of us. Anything we always say, like anything that Jim Henson touched or influenced is in our wheelhouse. So
Well,
yeah.
well, let me sort of set the scene a little bit. So the show premiered in '69, and it was 15 years later that Warner Brothers, in conjunction with Jim's company and the Children's Television Workshop, decided that it was time to make a film starring the Sesame Street characters. And this may be something that you and your listeners know, but the initial philosophy of the show Sesame Street was that that young viewers really lack the attention span to follow a long story. And so the show, obviously, I mean, it's such a brilliant show, but the whole format was, it was a fast-paced sketch show, and obviously with educational segments designed to resemble commercials. So Follow That Bird, in contrast, is a full-fledged narrative, and and on top of that, it's a very emotional odyssey. The main character really undergoes a kind of journey of self-discovery. So, and I trust that your listeners know the story of Follow That Bird, but I'm happy to tee it up in case any of them haven't.
I mean, yeah. If you want to go through, I mean, out of everyone on this chat, you're definitely the one most qualified to tell the story.
Well, I think it's worth just sort of reminding your listeners what the setup is. I mean, it's at the beginning of the film, we meet an avian social worker, Miss Finch, who has decided that Big Bird would be happier living with their own kind, and ships Big Bird off to Ocean View, Illinois, to live with a family of dodo birds. So that's all that I think. I think that's enough to remind everyone what a delightful story it is, and
the general plot, right? Yeah.
Well, here's my background. So in the early 1980s, I had just come out of film school. I went to USC and I didn't quite finish, but I was studying to get an MFA in filmmaking. But I left school to direct a couple of after-school specials, and those after-school specials came to the attention of someone at Warner Brothers, a producer who was developing Follow That Bird. The producer was Amy Pascal, who has since gone on to become a major fixture in entertainment, in the feature film world. She was a studio chief and a significant producer. She recommended me to Warner's, and the next thing I knew, I was living in LA, but the next thing I knew, I was flying to New York to meet Jim Henson, who had approval over who would direct this film. And I'm just going to tell you in some detail about that meeting, because it was one of the most memorable job interviews I've ever had.
Well, I'm quite lucky in that your publicist sent me a copy of your book. So I've read so Joe hasn't read this yet, but I've read the chapter on Follow That Bird. And I mean, we'll get you to tell the story about, all the meetings you had and that meeting with Jim.
Well, here's well, Jarrod, forgive me, you've read this, but I'm going to repeat some of what you already know.
Go for it.
But I met Jim at his office, Henson Associates, as it was called, on the Upper East Side, and I have no memory of what I wore to the job interview. But I distinctly remember that he had a T-shirt and blue jeans on, and he looked, he very low key, very hippie-ish. We sat across from each other. We sat across a coffee table from each other, and the coffee table had, lots of scripts and coffee mugs, and a mysterious green rag that I didn't make too much note of. I thought maybe the rag was there to clean up a coffee spill. But anyway, so pretty quickly into the interview, I made a choice that, in retrospect, I'm going to pat myself on the back. It was a rather bold choice, because I admitted to Jim that I had never directed a puppet and really didn't know anything about directing puppets. And, basically I was advertising my lack of qualifications for the job. in the interview. And who knows, the meeting could have gone south at that point, but in fact, Jim loved that I was being up front, and at that point he picked up the green rag and put his hand in it, and it was not a rag, it was Kermit. And Kermit introduced himself to me.
Kermit had a massive coffee spill on him that Jim had cleaned up.
I think that's what I honestly thought. Well, whoever cleans up in this office left a rag behind. But it was Kermit, and Kermit spoke to me, and then Jim gave me the key piece of advice. He said, just talk to the puppeteers like you would an actor. And so our meeting continued. And toward the end of the meeting, Jim said something that pretty much made it clear to me that I had won the job. And he said that he made a request of me. He said, on the first day of shooting, he said, what I want you to do is gather all the crew members, especially the camera people, especially the camera department, and bring everyone together and ask everyone to raise one hand in the air and hold it there for a solid minute. And as you could probably know, like holding your hand, it's actually kind of fatiguing to keep your hand in the air for a long time. But he wanted the crew members, again, particularly camera people, to know how taxing it was for the puppeteers to keep their characters on their marks or suspended, for long periods while all sorts of lighting and camera adjustments were being made. That was the one and only demand he made of me. So, and after that meeting, I had my first feature film job.
Wow.
So that's the background. And but I should say that there was a couple more meetings I had to have. I did have to meet a couple people from the Children's Television Workshop, but most importantly, I had to meet Carol Spinney.
Of course.
And so Carol was 51 years old in 1984. That's when we made the film. Came out the following year in 85. So he was 51, but he was, big surprise, like so spry, so athletic, and so sweet. Oh my gosh. So, and I mentioned this in my book, in my chapter about Follow That Bird, but now with about 3.5 decades of directing under my belt, I mean, I having endured more than a few like really difficult actors, I realized how spoiled I was to have someone as gentle as Carol collaborating with me on my first movie. So,
wow, what a gift! So I have so many questions about the production of this film. I'm almost like flabbergasted as to where to start. Some of the other directors that I've talked to who've worked with Muppets or Sesame characters, they talk a lot about the challenges of just physically, like how puppets work, where they're hidden, cutting holes in the set, things like that. But you probably didn't have to deal with that a ton because you were dealing with Big Bird, who's a full-bodied character who can walk down the street, doesn't have to hide behind a brick wall or be stuck in a floorboard or something like that. But did you have some experiences where you're like, oh yeah, we'll just have characters like sitting on Sesame Street, and someone said to you, well, hang on, you have to stop and think about all these little details that people can't do, or people can do and puppets can't do quite so easily?
Well, Big Bird, of course, I think, among the many challenges with Big Bird was just was more like a pictorial thing, how to frame him with other characters so that the compositions were attractive. I mean, that was one of the tricky things with Big Bird. But we also had to adjust, set pieces to accommodate Big Bird's height. And I think that my favorite is that for that wonderful, duet between Waylon Jennings and Big Bird in the farmer's truck, we retrofitted the truck so that Big Bird could sit in the passenger seat. Now, there's absolutely no logical reason why Waylon Jennings should be driving a truck with this ridiculously tall cab. And we literally, the transportation department on the film, like redid the cab. So, it looks perfect, but it looks perfectly absurd. So I would say that for me, what I found astonishing was just the puppeteers and their ability to crawl into tight spaces to work from. And I mentioned this in the chapter, but the one of my favorite moments on the set was watching Frank Oz and Jim Henson debate how to crawl into and puppeteer from a tiny biplane for Bert and Ernie when they're scouring the countryside looking for the runaway big bird. And I'm literally, I didn't say anything. I just was like a fly on the wall listening to them talk about, well, if you put your elbow here and I put my knee here, and they literally, it was like so it was like talking about how two people could turn themselves into a pretzel. And there were a number of,
but they're used to
but they
it.
loved, but I think they loved that. They loved that
Yeah.
challenge. And it was also, like there's a number of tricky ones, like in as part of the group that goes to rescue Big Bird. Cookie Monster is with Gordon and Olivia in a Volkswagen Beetle. So Frank Oz needed to puppeteer Cookie from the back seat floorboards of a Volkswagen Beetle, and I have no clue to this day how he did it.
I don't know how he didn't get incredibly motion sick.
Oh, well, here, speaking of motion sickness, and for the scenes with Super Grover, Frank and I sat with a camera operator atop a moving crane. So this is, this was a very low-tech movie, and a very lo-fi movie, I should say, and a very analog era movie, and that one of the many things I love about it. And for scenes of Grover flying, there was no green screen. We literally we got up high on a crane and rolled down the street, and Frank puppeteered, like strapped into the seat on top of crane.
That's one of the reasons why this movie holds up as well as it does, because of all these practical effects. When you see Super Grover flying and the trees are above him and Cookie Monster's in the back seat while they're driving down the street or whatever it is, if that was done with green screen or any kind of CGI or any kind of computer enhancement, it would be like, whatever. But like those characters get to live in the real world, and the movie really highlights that. Everything feels very, very real. Even the decision of what the locations are, being, in Illinois, being in Toadstool with the parade and driving down the street, flying over the cornfield, all that stuff is some very specific references that make us feel like, they're not like flying over New York City. They're not, in the bottom of the ocean. They could be in your backyard, basically.
Right. Well, weirdly enough, it's almost like the characters are fantastical, but they abide by natural laws in the movie.
Yes, exactly.
For
the most part, yeah.
For the most part, but no, I love that fact. I mean, it was a product of necessity. It was a fairly small budget, but I love I love the ingenuity of the people who came up with things like the Countmobile. There are a few shots of the Countmobile driving on its own. And
that's what surprised. I actually had that written down because in the book you describe it as built to scale automobile that had room for one puppeteer lying on his back, performing the count while free driving with the aid of a video monitor. Does that mean that the puppeteer was actually driving that car?
Yes. Now, by the way, when I say driving, there was not a lot of driving. There's only like a few.
There's a couple of shots. I'm going to say there's only one I can think of when he's counting the telephone poles.
Yeah, there's definitely. Now, by the way, I'll be very specific, and your listeners will appreciate this. Now, the side angle shots where we're sort of looking at the count in profile. Now, those were not free driving at all.
Mm-hmm.
Those were, we attached the Countmobile to a camera car. But there are a couple of frontal shots where we just wanted to make sure that, head to toe, we saw the whole Countmobile and the Count singing. And no, but I to be honest, I can go on a little more about the lo-fi quality of things, which I'm super proud of. I'll mention a couple other things. For instance, there's a wonderful tilt down from Bert and Ernie's biplane back to Waylon Jennings and Big Bird in the truck, which sort of, kind of starts the beginning of the final verse or the final chorus, I guess, of the song. And there was, again, they were not married by visual effects. That was me on the back of a camera car. And as soon as I sensed the biplane was about to, fly over us, I signaled to the camera operator to tilt quickly, and also gave a hand cue to the sound person, who then hit the button so that Big Bird and Waylon could, come right in on the top line of the chorus. So it was all like it was very lo-fi. And I
always assumed that shot was matted. Like I always assumed that those were two different shots that you just blurred it really quickly. I had no idea that was done in camera.
No, that was an in-camera effect. And the other really wonderful in-camera effect, and again, this may be less a function of budget, more just a product of me being like a silent movie nerd. But when we first arrive at the Dodo house, there's a wonderful wide shot of the neighborhood with the Dodo house on a pole in the background. Well, the way we did that shot was with a foreground miniature. So in fact, there's a pole that's real, and there's a neighborhood that's real, and there's a car with Big Bird's head sticking out of it that's real. It's all driving toward, but the actual house itself was suspended in the foreground of the shot, and the house is no bigger than, a loaf of bread.
Wow.
So
they don't make movies like that anymore.
Not
right?
at all.
I mean,
I will be very happy to share with you a photo of me like framing up the foreground miniature of the Dodo house. It's a super cool photo.
Oh yeah,
please do. Absolutely.
We'd love to see that. We'll put it in the show notes for this episode. For people to see.
And I think that there's a lot of, again, there are certainly things that were done in post-production. For instance, the climactic triptych of the song One Little Star, where you see Snuffleupagus, Olivia, and Big Bird singing, but it was still very much in camera. I just sort of framed each of them in a way that I knew that in post we could marry the shots. It wasn't manipulated in any sophisticated way. And so again, that's one of the joys of the film. I'm glad you appreciate
Incredible.
That is amazing.
Oh my God. Yes.
Well,
absolutely.
So like you talk about these things. So this purely by chance, even before I had thought to ask if we could interview you, a few weeks ago, Follow That Bird was on TV here in Australia.
Okay.
And my mother had never seen it. And I just happened to be like, it was quite late at night. And I was like, oh yeah, I'll watch the last half an hour of this. And my mum, sitting there, put her iPad down and was mesmerized at the scene where Big Bird has to jump from the back of the truck onto the hood of the other car. And she's like, was that real? I was like, I would assume so. It was 1984.
Yes, it is very real. Obviously, we weren't going very fast, and a lot of the humor of the scene is that we're not going fast either. But it was Carol Spinney on the back of that truck, standing with that cage door open. And now I'll be honest with you, it's probable that we had for our wide shots a stunt double for Gordon.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine that we did any of the wide shots with the actor, but certainly all of the close coverage, he was sort of standing there on the hood, or what was left of the hood after Cookie chewed it up, of the Volkswagen. But yeah, no, that was again all practical, and again the fact that if in a different era, a different filmmaker might have, using visual effects, might have made the action go faster, meaning the driving could go faster. But I actually for me, the charm of it is that they're not moving that quickly. You can still get hurt if you fall off a moving vehicle at whatever speed. But I kind of love the fact that they're having this dialogue about whether or not Bird should jump.
And Gordon's like giving permission, like, it's okay to jump. Oh, I'm really not supposed to. Big Bird, you can do it now. It's okay.
Just this once.
Just this once.
I have to. I've always been curious, like what CTW said about that scene, because nowadays Sesame Workshop has so many different rules that are much more strict than they were when we were young about what characters can and can't do. And that's the one thing where it's like, not in a million years would they have allowed a shot of Big Bird jumping from a moving vehicle. And obviously, it may have even been a no-go back then, but it's the climax of the movie. Like, something big has to happen. So
Right.
do you remember getting any
Well,
pushback about that decision?
no, not at all. And now the writers of the screenplay were Sesame Street veterans, Tony Geis and Judy Freudberg, both neither of whom are with us, and they were just fantastic, such smart writers. So they everything, was approved by the Children's Television Workshop as well as Henson and Warner. So there were three, I was serving three different entities, but that, no, nobody raised any alarm. There were no red flags about that, nor was there any red flags simply about the idea that the Sleaze brothers, Joe Flaherty and Dave Thomas, kidnap Big Bird and dye him blue, which,
Which is traumatizing.
it's traumatizing, and
can we
it's child
can we talk
abuse.
about that for a second? It is child abuse. Can we talk about that for a second? Because I feel like, well, first of all, anytime someone finds out that you directed Follow That Bird, is their first reaction, oh my God, the scene where Big Bird is blue makes me cry every time? Or like, you traumatize me with that scene. Because whenever I hear it come up in conversation, that's the first thing people tell me.
Yeah.
No, I not only have many people told me it was traumatizing. I was sent somebody posted a list of favorite childhood films that traumatized them, and this was like on the top of the list. And,
that's got to feel good, right?
It's the most, yeah, exactly. No, it's well, first of all, it's like abusive, to dye a child blue, but it's also the most heartbreaking scene in the film, where he's like singing this,
Sure.
like, this incredibly sad song. And I would say that for me, the real takeaway, though, is that, putting aside, quote, people being traumatized, the real thing is that people were involved. People were emotionally invested in Big Bird. People were so emotionally invested in him that that to me is the beauty of the film. Ultimately, is that, you don't you don't usually cry at Big Bird sketches on the show. You don't, but this story actually is very emotionally, I think it's quite depthful, and it sort of reaches a, kind of a either low point or high point, depending on your point of view, with that scene where he's dyed blue. And of course, as
Sure.
and he jumps from the truck to the Volkswagen dyed blue, and then of course he shows up on Sesame Street again, all yellow, and I have no clue why. I don't.
He took a bath. He's fine.
He took a bath.
So,
But
I have a couple of very hyper specific questions about the Bluebird of Happiness
Yes.
sequence. We'll see if you remember any of these things. So, first of all, the kids who were watching Big Bird sing this song, it's a series of twins throughout the whole room. It's been kind of speculated in the fan community of, like, was it just a cool thing, like cool visual, or was there an actual deeper meaning to the fact that there's all these different twins watching this show? And if you have no memory of this, that's fine too.
No, but I have this funny, I don't remember. I doubt seriously that it was in the script. I have a hunch that it was an idea that probably came up in a meeting with the extras casting director, and I probably thought, that's a cool idea. But I think I also liked the idea that the villains are siblings, and then we just basically cut to a lot of cutaway. We have several cutaways of twins or siblings in the audience, and but I don't think there was much more thought given than that. But it's a delicious little detail. So I'm
it really
happy
is, yeah. And I actually like that description, especially because the movie really is all about family and learning who your family is. And families can be good or bad, as shown by the Sleaze brothers, or they could just be audiences who get very sad watching their favorite characters sing a sad song in a cage.
Yeah. I mean, the mission of the show, the whole mission of the show is to make audiences feel that you can be comfortable with all kinds, with monsters, with humans, and so for me, that underneath everything with Follow That Bird is the idea that not only is it about leaving home to find home, but it's really about discovering that you don't need to be with your own kind to be happy.
Yeah,
absolutely.
In the same sequence, while Big Bird is singing, when we see him in the cage, he's wearing like a giant pair of trousers, like I think they're plaid pants. Why? Like, because his legs weren't like, it didn't matter if his legs were orange or blue or whatever. It was just the feathers that were dyed.
And that decision was made by the Henson people. That was part of the Henson people, came up with that costume detail. And I think it makes sense though, because the Blue Bird of Happiness is a character that Bird is forced to play. So he's not only blue, but he's sort of costumed. It's sort of it sort of adds it, for me, it added an extra layer of humiliation. Not that being dyed blue, isn't enough, but it's like,
right,
and it sort of adds to the pathos of the scene. But I don't remember a lot of discussion about it.
And actually, as you were just saying that, I had forgotten. And Jarrod, you just saw the movie more recently than I have. Yeah. He's wearing like a white ruffle around.
Yeah, he's got the collar,
well, right? Yeah,
got like
right. So yeah, it's a whole costume.
Like a Shakespearean, rough. It also, and I think there's a little bit of a, you can find an antecedent in something like, Pinocchio, where I think that Pinocchio is wearing a costume when he's forced to perform.
Yeah.
And but yeah, it's a remarkable scene, if I may, and I feel like it's amazing that people still single it out, not always as traumatizing, but just as powerful.
Well, I'm sure you've probably
it's absolutely powerful.
I'm sure you've probably heard about this, but I've just looked it up because I couldn't remember where it was. The Metropolitan Museum of Art last year had an installation on the roof of a blue big bird.
Oh, wow.
I'm like, Joe, I think you've.
I'm looking for the booklet. Hang on, I have it somewhere.
Okay.
Wow.
Edit this out, Jarrod.
Wow. I didn't know.
Yeah, we'll see if we can find you the photo. Here we go. All right, so Joe's got the photo coming up.
So it was on the roof. So it was on the roof of the Metropolitan Museum of Art here in New York City. Here, that's the back of the booklet.
Wow.
If you could see it.
Wow. That's amazing.
We'll put the show in the show notes.
Yeah,
pictures in the show notes for the. The artist, whose name is Alex Decourt, he did this because he made him blue in part because of Follow That Bird, but also he grew up watching Sesame Street, where one of the international Sesame Streets, which has Pino instead of Big Bird, who was a blue bird. So he kind of gave an homage to both things, but Pino and
Pino is
Big Bird from Follow That Bird.
Another full body costume bird. I didn't know. That's great.
Yeah, all the international Sesame Streets that do their own co-production, they have a lot of the same characters. Like they all have an Elmo, they all have a Grover, but the rest of their cast, they have unique characters, and they all have one big walk around character. Sometimes it's a bird, sometimes it's something else, but it's always kind of interesting to see their extended families. They all have their own Grouch character, that sort of thing. It's pretty neat.
I was when I got the job to direct the film, I realized that there were a ton of Sesame Street characters I didn't know who were all in the film, and I mentioned this in my book, but I unearthed the original cast list. I have it right in front of me, actually, if you want. And these are the characters that are in the film that I didn't know.
Great.
Ready? We've got Gladys, the theatrical cow, Telly Monster, of course, Buster the horse, I didn't know, Prairie Dawn, I think one of the few female Muppets at the time, right?
That's, for the time, for sure. Yep.
And another one, Grungetta, Forgetful Jones, Barkley, an astonishing character, Harry Monster, Hairy Monster is pretty popular. Captain
Mhm.
Vegetable. I don't even know if I
Oh, I
remember
love Captain Vegetable.
I mean,
Uh,
he was in one sketch, so I'm surprised
But it's a
they
very
allowed
famous
him to
sketch.
possibly show up at somewhere else. It's a very famous
well,
sketch, but like he's never. I mean, at that time he had never been on the street. You know, it's not like he had hung out with the rest of the characters. Yeah.
definitely in the ensemble scenes in Follow That Bird. Sully,
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Nobel Price, uh,
Right.
Biff, Biff the Hard Hat, I think was fairly
Mhm.
popular. Two-headed
Mm-hmm.
Monster, Mumford the Magician, and of course many honkers. And this is this is an important thing. We shot the film in Toronto. We shot in 1984. There were a lot of puppet characters, and we were able to tap into the wonderful group of puppeteers that Jim groomed for the show Fraggle Rock. That was a Toronto-based production. So a lot of our characters, most of, I would say all of them, except for like the major characters, were puppeteered by the Fraggle Rock puppeteers, and they were such a fantastic group. So good.
Well,
That's
you
great.
mentioned as well.
Since you
You mentioned as well that there's in your book that there's one shot of a tiny little red puppet.
Absolutely. Well, you know what? It's a significant scene, actually. It's the climax. It's really the climax of the film after Big Bird has returned and Miss Finch shows up, determined to, find another foster bird family for him. And at this point, Maria, basically gives the mission statement of the film and the show, and lists all of the different creatures and people that live together in harmony on Sesame Street. And it gave me a chance to do a shot I'm very proud of, a 360-degree pan of the entire Sesame Street set and all the characters. And deep in the background, poking its head out of a window, is Elmo, who Elmo was at the bottom of the puppet cast list. Elmo was listed as Elmo Monster,
Yep.
and so Elmo has a cameo in Follow That Bird before being plucked from obscurity.
It's funny.
Being plucked,
so when they re-released the film, I'm gonna say on DVD, this is probably Joe.
Yes.
Any idea? 2008.
Yeah, it was probably
2009.
if maybe even earlier
than that.
Yeah, sometime in the
They had
2000s.
a shot of Big Bird, then all the characters in the film, and Elmo's on it, and fans were going, "What? Elmo's not in this? Like Elmo's in this film for genuinely maybe 13 frames. That's about it."
Exactly.
Yeah. And whoever it was who approved that DVD cover art was probably like, thank God Elmo's in it for 2 seconds because
we can
Elmo
sell
sells.
it. Yeah.
Like, yeah, exactly. It's not false advertising. Although, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no. I have to say, I was very delighted when a few years later, when Elmo sort of came into prominence, and that somebody needed to point it out to me. I didn't know that. I didn't know there was a star waiting in the wings there, like in the background of the scene.
Well, you mentioned,
amazing.
You read through the list of characters you didn't know, and all but one of them in the film, besides maybe a honker, sort of are only in it for either a line or just a cameo, whatever it is. But you mentioned Tally Monster, and Tally is a very big part of that film. That was also the first time Marty Robinson was playing him. So what was it like then having this character you didn't know, and especially as Marty's finding it as well? What was it like for you having this character be such a big part of the film if you didn't know a ton about them?
Well, it's funny because it's possible that Marty finding that character really it was kind of fed into who that character is in a way, because Telly is all about not having a point of view, or not being sure, or being ambivalent, or always seeing two sides of things. So maybe the fact that Marty was sort of searching for the character really supported that. But I love Telly Monster, and I would say that very quickly into shooting the picture, I really gravitated towards Telly. and loved Marty. And of course, Marty was doing double duty because he was also the front half of Snuffleupagus. And
Right. Yeah.
and I think that in the back half of Snuffleupagus on the film was Bryant Young, who, if I'm not mistaken, you please correct me if I'm wrong. Did Bryant Young create and perform Big Bear or Bear in the Big Blue House?
No, you're thinking of Noel McNeil, who
Noel
plays.
McNeil. Noel McNeil.
Yeah, because Noel is Big Bird when Carol is not in Big Bird.
Got it.
I know he's
Oh,
told me the
that's right.
story about Noel was, I believe, was in the Big Bird outfit during the North by Northwest scene. You know, having
Yes.
the plane kind of clip him. Because, you know, like if we're going to lose a puppeteer, like let it not be Carol Spinney, I guess.
Oh, no, you know what? I thank you for reminding me. Noel was fantastic. And I happen to think Bear in the Big Blue House is one of the great unsung shows. It's just and that character is remarkable. Oh,
absolutely. Yeah.
I'll mention one thing about North by Northwest, and that is, you know, I had a fairly free hand, you know, especially considering it was the first film I directed. I had a pretty free hand, you know, coming up with gags and different things that weren't in the script. And the North by Northwest homage was completely my idea. I thought, well, we've got Big Bird in a cornfield and we've got a biplane swooping down. Why don't we go for it? And Carol loved the idea.
Oh, that's so great.
So we just I think we probably, you know, found a VHS of North by Northwest and pulled up the scene and pretty much copied it shot for shot. And you know, and I feel like very blessed in the sense that, you know, in a way, even though this was a film for Warner Brothers, Jim Henson's company, and Children's Television Workshop, in a funny way, it was nobody was looking over my shoulder, or rather nobody was, you know, I kind of was able to do a lot of things that you know, with a lot of freedom. And you know, and I guess for me, one of the things I'd love to mention is I had a free hand in like choosing the crew and you know, and the cameo cast.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, and you know, the cinematographer of Follow That Bird was Curtis Clark, who had gained, you know, renown a couple of years earlier photographing this incredibly visually elegant film directed by Peter Greenaway, The Draftsman's Contract. Not the person you'd say, okay, got to get that guy to direct Follow That Bird. And our production designer, Carol Spear, in 1984, the most prominent things on her resume was she had done basically every David Cronenberg film.
Oh, wow.
She art directed, you know, Scanners and oh my gosh, see, you know, what were the other ones she did? The Brood, Videodrome, and of course, you know, how do you follow that? Well, Follow That Bird, of course. And I feel like our cameo cast is, in a way, it's, you know, kind of a little funky and edgy. I mean, Sandra Bernhard had, you know, just starred in The King of Comedy, and I invited her to be the waitress in the Grouch Cafe. And one of my favorite cameos, the wonderful late director and actor Paul Bartel, who directed such wonderful, you know, cult films like Eating Raoul. And I invited him to be the chef in the Grouch Cafe, and he has one of my favorite bits when he serves the tossed salad by loading it onto a catapult.
And it's funny because I've been rewatching or watching for the first time a lot of Joe Dante movies, and like stuff from the, you know, the low budget B movie era. And Paul Bartel's in all those things. Like he's, you know, like it's just like in the first few things, I think I was watching Piranha, and I'm like, God, that guy looks so familiar. Who is he? And I've seen him in the last few things. It's the Grouch Cook. Of course it is.
Well, he's in a lot of those B movies, and I think he and Joe Dante actually co-directed one called Hollywood Boulevard. And
I watched that. Yeah.
But Paul was such a sweetheart, and he had, I think the film he directed right before coming to Toronto to play the Grouch Cafe chef was Lust in the Dust. And but also I'm just, you know, the fact that you know, I was a longtime Second City TV super fan. So, just to ask Dave Thomas and Joe Flaherty to play the Sleaze Brothers, to get, John Candy to come aboard to play the
Such a
police
great
officer who
shot where he just picks the kid up. The kid just points at them.
that kid,
Terrific.
that is a great bit. And I do actually remember, like, below frame a couple of PAs there to help lift the kid up. And actually, that boy who points at the Sleaze Brothers, he's in one of my favorite scenes in the whole film. He's the boy who was stuck at the top of the Ferris wheel at the Sleaze Brothers Carnival, and they won't let him down until he gives them another nickel. And so I remember saying to Curtis Clark, our cinematographer, what's the most dynamic shot we can do of this this boy and this Ferris wheel? And so we managed. It's only on the screen for a few seconds, but there is a shot where we somehow got the camera above the Ferris wheel, looking straight down at this boy as he reaches for a nickel in his pocket and drops it down into Joe Flaherty's hands. It's a remarkable shot. And
that's a great shot too, where the nickel falls into Joe Flaherty's hand and then he just slaps it on the bar all in one movement. Bam,
Well, it was, again, I just feel like that, people like Carol Spear, Curtis Clark, and even in post-production, having the, legendary Van Dyke Parks aboard to do our underscore, just everybody kind of raised the level of the picture. It's a great group.
Definitely.
And then, last but not least, Waylon Jennings. We talked about him. I wasn't a fan of Waylon Jennings. I grew to be afterwards, but just the idea that we had the outlaw music pioneer, singing a duet with Big Bird, and just the combination of their voices, his gravelly, hard edge sound, and I don't know how you describe Big Bird's singing voice, but it was.
Well, I love the fact that you have these two completely opposing characters, I guess. And then Carol Spinney talked a lot in his life about how close he and Waylon Jennings became. Like, they spent Christmases together.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, they became extremely close friends. And yeah, that's the beginning of a beautiful friendship in that film.
Oh, you know what? I want to know more about that. I'll seek out some Carol interviews to find out. I don't remember him mentioning that in his autobiographical documentary.
No, it's probably not in the book or in the documentary. Yeah, but I remember asking him about it. I think I may have just asked him, "Who's your favorite celebrity that you worked with?" And he told me about how he was such a huge fan of Waylon Jennings before the film, and then getting to share that scene, and the song is so good. My wife and I sing that song on every road trip. And like, it's almost a crime that there's not like a good clean version out there, like on Spotify that we can just like put on, or like some that no one's ever covered that song, any of the songs from this movie, as far as I know. Like, the music in this movie is great.
The music is good, and the music was written. All the songs were written by Warner Brothers music staff writers, all housed in Nashville. So during pre-production, I had the pleasure of going to Music Row in Nashville, where at the Warner Brothers, music house, I guess you'd call it it was basically like just a fraternity house where once a day all these songwriters would show up and hang around and come up with songs. It's the Nashville equivalent of Tin Pan Alley, or the Nashville equivalent of like the Brill Building, and but it was but those songwriters they did a wonderful job. I mean, One Star.
One of my favorite songs, and I actually listened to this a couple of times when Carol Spinney passed away, because it was just, it just meant a lot to me. It was the Grouch anthem, which opens the film, which is such a great song.
Yeah.
And I also love the idea of, all right, we're going to start the Sesame Street movie with nothing to do with the rest of the film. We're just going to sing a funny song for 2.5 minutes and then get into it.
I believe that, and I'm not sure I should take credit for it, but I believe the homage to Patton was my idea. I'll have to dig up a copy of the script to see if it was in an early draft. But I remember I don't know why, but I just love the idea of a giant American flag at the beginning of the picture.
It's
And it comes
beautiful. It's a
before,
beautiful
it comes
shot.
before, yeah. And by the way, speaking of Carol and Oscar, um, I'm forgetting about one character that's sort of astonishing, and that's Bruno,
The trash man. Yeah.
Oscar's chauffeur. Yeah, and I don't know how often that character was in use, but and you obviously you know the character. So Bruno is Carol in a full bodysuit carrying a trash can with Oscar in it. So one hand is a dummy hand that's holding the trash can handle so that Carol can puppeteer Oscar. And when Bruno walked on the set, adults did a double take because it seemed to be just uncanny that there was no floor, there was nothing, there was no mask, there was nothing masking the puppeteer. There was a man holding a trash can. There was nothing under the trash can, and there was a live character inside Oscar. It was astonishing to see, grown people just like flabbergasted by this simple, ingenious,
It's amazing.
sleight
I
of
mean, that's
hand, as
just
it were.
Carol Spinney, like in a nutshell. I mean, you talk a little bit in your book
Oh,
as well about the opening when you meet Big Bird. He's on roller skates, and that was Carol Spinney, and he did
yeah,
episodes of Sesame Street on a unicycle as Big Bird.
yeah.
It baffles me that
That's
he could do
insane,
this.
man.
Like, what a man.
It is baffling, and also that that when he's on skates, he's not just skating a straight line. He'll kind of pirouette. He'll do some moves. So here he is. He's got his right hand straight up in the air, operating the beak, and he's looking straight down at this little 1-inch monitor strapped to his chest, and roller skating, and not knocking anything over. And it's like I'm just, oh my gosh, and it was just on every level. I do remember Carol may have talked about this in some interview or another, but Carol spent so much of his professional life with his right hand. I'm almost sure it was his right hand in the air, that he said he had a kind of an overdeveloped right shoulder muscle that he
Yeah,
actually
sure.
used to work out.
That happens.
Just
Yeah.
he just worked out with he worked with hand weights to kind of make sure his left hand and left arm and shoulder muscle matched his right. But
I want to go back to talking about some of the celebrities that you had in this movie. The one that we didn't mention, and you may not have worked with them because it could have been a B crew, was Chevy Chase as
yes.
delivering the news. First of all, I noticed that all of these, I assume that Sandra Bernhard is also Canadian, but I know the rest of them are, which is interesting. Just that you filmed in Canada, were you kind of locked into using Canadian talent when it came to the celebs?
No, not at all. In fact, well, let's see. Well, Waylon is not Canadian. Sandra, I don't
Oh,
think
sure.
is Canadian, and Paul Bartel's not Canadian. Chevy, you're absolutely correct. We shot Chevy's segment while I was in Canada, so he was in Los Angeles at the time, and
Mhm.
and a friend of mine taped his news segment. But no, there was no financial pressure to do that. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, like in 1984, both Joe Flaherty, Dave Thomas lived in near Toronto, but I believe both Joe and John Candy were living in Los Angeles. So there
Mhm.
was, I mean, they're obviously Canadian, but there was no particular pressure to hire Canadian celebrities for the film. Are we missing anyone? I think that's all of them.
I think
But
that's everybody.
but I have to say, I didn't get John Candy came aboard only for the one day, but he was a total sweetheart. But Joe and Dave, I just really enjoyed getting to kind of watch them in action, and I was, at times I would just forget to call cut because they would just start improvising, and I would just I feel like I had the best seat in the house watching these two masters just kind of riff off each other, and I had the pleasure. I'm not sure how many years later it was, but I got the pleasure of directing Joe Flaherty again when he played
Yeah.
Linda Cardellini's dad in the show
Oh,
Freaks
sure.
and Geeks. So I had
Yeah.
the
A
pleasure
show of which we're
directing
all
it.
big fans of. Yeah. So since you were the one to choose the celebrity cast, was there anyone that you remember wanting for the film that you weren't able to get?
I absolutely. Um, I wanted the Grouch Diner to have a pianist, like someone playing piano. And we asked Randy Newman if he would play the Grouch Cafe pianist. And I mean, I can't imagine, except possibly Tom Waits. I can't imagine anyone better suited
Oh,
to play the Grouch
That would have been
Cafe
fantastic.
pianist
Tom
than Randy
Waits as a
Newman.
Grouch pianist. Oh, that would have been perfect. And like
But,
playing like the diviest of dive, like in a diner, is just chef's kiss. Perfect.
but anyway,
Did you
so there
also?
was.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I
Go
was
ahead.
just going to say there wasn't any real role for, there wasn't any dialogue. There wasn't really a song. So it was really just to see if Randy Newman would be game, and he was not available. But that was
Oh,
the one
bummer.
that got away. That would have been my dream.
That would have been fun. Were you also involved with choosing some of the celebrity voice casts, like Sally Kellerman as Miss Finch, or Lorraine Newman and Eddie Deason as some of the Dodos?
Absolutely. So Sally Kellerman and Eddie Deason and Lorraine were definitely my choices. I mean, I worked with the casting director, obviously, and playing Daddy Dodo is one of my oldest and best friends, Brian Hofeld, and then playing Marie Dodo. Oh my gosh, I'm
Kathy
forgetting.
Silvers.
Her name was Kathy
Thank
Silvers. Yeah,
Kathy
we both have it
Silvers.
open in front of us.
Yeah.
Oh, she did a wonderful job. And of course, I'd been an Eddie Deason fan ever since seeing him in films like 1941 and I Want to Hold Your Hand. And I mean, can you imagine a better voice for Donnie
Oh,
Dodo?
no way.
That's
Yeah.
perfect. All of them are
And
perfect.
Sally,
Yep.
and Sally was great. I mean, Sally was wonderful, and it was again sort of a treat to just to work with people who I idolize from watching them in films like MASH, or needless to say, being a fan of the original cast of Saturday Night Live, getting to work with Lorraine Newman, and got to hear some good stories about all the misadventures of it during the early days of SNL. So
Yeah.
Oh, that's the best. I love it.
Before you joined us, as I sort of did the introduction, I went through some of your credits, and it's funny, like, I asked for the interview, and then I went, oh, look up just a little, because I know you've done The Office and stuff like that, but I was like, oh, look up the other stuff. And then the more I read, the more I got intimidated, as I realized Freaks and Geeks, Malcolm in the Middle, Parks and Rec, Space Force, all that sort of stuff. With such a massive career you've had over, nearly 40 years since you've done Follow That Bird, how often are you getting to talk about Follow That Bird anymore?
well, not enough. I mean, I love the film. It's funny because I feel like there's, for some reason, there's been renewed interest in the film. I can't explain why. Maybe it's that people who saw it when they were, young, when they were the target audience, are now of an age that they're looking back at it, and so many people sort of point to it as either like the first thing they saw, the first movie they saw, or just a real pivotal movie experience. But I will say that the thing I love to talk about when people ask about the film was, and again, I'm kind of repeating what I said earlier, but I was unprepared when I directed the film. I was unprepared for how emotional the story is, and I think I was, let's see, I was 25 or 26 when I directed the film. I was very young. I was just out of film school, and I think I was more, to be honest, I think I was more of a film fan than a storyteller at that point in my life. I could talk a lot about favorite films and favorite images from films, but I hadn't really thought of myself as a storyteller. And I think that, it wasn't until I was well into shooting the film that it hit me how emotionally strong the story is. The story of leaving home to find home, or the story of finding who your people are and things like that. And that was kind of a big discovery for me as a director. And I've often said that, it took an 8-foot bird to teach me that one of my jobs as a director was to become a good student of human nature. So I feel like I'm glad that that's where I started with that story. And I mean, literally, I mentioned earlier about the challenges of photographing Big Bird. But I think there was a moment during shooting where Big Bird ceased to be an object for me and became the subject of the story. So that was kind of a major turning point for me as a filmmaker.
Wow. I mean, that's the great thing about Big Bird. He's just still teaching, no matter what your age, he's still teaching us everything.
Absolutely.
So what you're saying is that we all have to thank Big Bird for giving us Michael Scott. It all just came together really well.
I think, yes, I see that connection every day.
Joe, do you have anything else before we?
Yeah. Okay. So again, in the Bluebird of Happiness scene, there's a moment where a single tear comes down Big Bird's beak. And yes. I'm curious, it looks at equal times like a real drop of water, like something like a puppet, like something being dragged with a string, or like a drop of mercury even, because it's got this like beautiful shine to it. Do you recall how you did that one shot?
Again, I think totally lo-fi. I think that it's a practical tear, meaning it's a piece of material. I don't remember what the tear was made of, that we pulled along Big Bird's face, and I don't recall exactly how we did it, meaning, and I don't remember much discussion about it with the Muppet Workshop people. Again, one of the great things. I mean, again, I was the new kid on the team in a way, and far be it for me to tell the Henson specialists how to create puppet effects. So I think they were on top of that from the get-go. Like they knew this tier was important, so they came up with a good way to do it.
So the movie came out in 1985, and I believe it was right before this that Mr. Snuffleupagus became, quote unquote, real, or basically revealed to the world that he's not just Big Bird's imaginary friend. And the movie really balances that line very cleverly, where nobody addresses, Big Bird doesn't say, well, I sent a letter to my friend Mr. Snuffleupagus, and all the adults say who, but also Snuffy is definitely kept separate from everyone else. It's always kind of either in Big Bird's nest area or in the park, where we see him later. Was this something that you were kind of encouraged to keep nebulous so that people could kind of see Snuffy in either way? Or was that even like a conscious thing while you were filming this?
It was not something I ever spoke about with the writers or with Marty or anyone. Now, my hunch is, and you may know this better than I. You certainly will know it better than I. We shot the film in the early summer of '84. It came out in August of '85. Now, it's entirely possible that shift in how Snuffy is represented on the show happened after we shot the film, but before it came out. So it's because I don't remember any discussions about keeping it vague, or I mean, I only thought of Snuffy as Bird's imaginary friend. So it's entirely possible that the powers that be at Sesame Street made that decision after the film was shot. So again, I don't know enough about the show to answer that. I can tell you that
that's all right.
The week I can tell you that the week before the film came out, Rambo First Blood Part 2 was released.
Real competition for Follow That Bird.
I was gonna say that, happily not our target audience.
No, well,
right.
You've talked a little bit about in your book as well about the preview screening, and just that it maybe didn't go as well as you might have kind of hoped.
Well, it was one of the strangest preview screenings ever. First of all, I'm not sure we needed a preview screening, but I actually asked for one, and the studio kind of begrudgingly agreed, because they didn't really. I mean, I'm going to put it really bluntly. That Follow That Bird was kind of the runt of the litter at Warner Brothers. They had a lot of big pictures coming out, and Follow That Bird was something they loved. They loved the film, but it was not one of their tentpole pictures. So we had this preview screening in which the entire audience was children, young children, and it was held at a screening room. It was actually held at the screening room in Toronto, that's part of the film lab. I think it was called Medallion Lab. And a healthy sized screening room, a lot of seats. And when I arrived for the screening, I entered the back of the theater, and it was, well, at least for the moment, I thought the room was empty. I saw no one. And I even said to someone, where's the, nobody's here. And they said, no, the place is packed. And I started to walk down the aisle and noticed that actually every seat was filled, but the seat backs were so high that I couldn't see anyone. They were so little. And also the seat backs were so high that the children in the audience couldn't see the screen.
Oh
So
no.
so I basically got in front of the whole group and instructed all the children, or however many wanted to stand up in their seats to watch the film. So the premiere screening, or the unveiling of Follow That Bird, was seen by a group of children standing up, bouncing, a lot of bouncing in their seats. Some of the
Bouncing
kids
is good.
leaned.
Yeah.
Bouncing is good. Some leaned against the seat back in front of them. Some leaned against the seat back behind them. Some of them fell off their seats, climbed back up. And I would say that it was, needless to say, it was not possible to gauge anything from how they reacted, because they were having a blast bouncing while they were watching the film. So
wow.
Chaos.
So how often do you find yourself revisiting this film? Because like for people like me and Jarrod, like we rewatch. I mean, you could tell like we've memorized the whole thing, shot for shot.
I watched it 3 weeks ago.
We watch it all the time. Yeah, right. But do you watch your old work a lot?
Well, I don't, but and Jarrod knows this, but I about a year ago I published a book about directing, and it's partly about how to direct, and it's partly a memoir. And so I'm a bit of a pack rat. I have kept everything, every call sheet. I have every the paper. I have every piece of paper associated with anything I've directed, and so I had the pleasure of going through all the Follow That Bird notes and papers and storyboards, and in fact, going through it reminded me about Randy Newman being on the wish list for the Grouch Diner, and but so I was able to really relive it, and there's nothing like looking at a call sheet. If your listeners don't know what that is, it's basically the daily schedule of shooting. So on any given day, it'd be like how long did we spend on any given scene, etc. It really brought the whole experience back to me. Just looking at, the first thing up on a Wednesday morning was, shooting a shot of Super Grover, flying into the top of the Volkswagen Beetle, things like that. So, and it was the first experience I had as a feature director. So naturally, it remains very vivid for me. But I guess when I've looked at it, I haven't really watched the whole film top to bottom in a long time, but when I look at scenes, I mean, you always kind of like think about choices you made that maybe you would have done differently, but mostly I'm just, and again, forgive me if I sound like I'm bragging, but mostly I'm sort of impressed by the kind of elegance of the film. There's a certain kind of simplicity, and again, it goes back to that kind of analog era, lo-fi quality, but there's something kind of like I don't know, very elegant about a lot of the staging, a lot of the visual ideas. There's nothing gimmicky. There's nothing, we didn't undercrank so that people are running fast. Like everything sort of has a kind of nice elegance to it.
That's great. Well, first of all, I think you should watch it again because it's a really good movie.
Yeah.
I highly recommend it. But also, like, I'm so grateful that you kept so many things because, I mean, you mentioned a photo earlier, but like, whatever, like, if you've got pictures or something that looks interesting, like this stuff is like candy to us. Like, we would love to see more of whatever you've got, if only for the archival reasons,
I have a couple of key photos that I would love to share with you, and one of which I included couple of which I included in my book, but I'll send you them so that you'll have them in bigger form. And if you have if your listeners, have a website they can go to see them, that'd be great.
We do. It's called toughpigs.com, and people hopefully
I,
will be
I,
looking at the at the show notes
Show
anyway.
notes.
To see
I'll chuck it up on the
whatever it is we've
socials.
got.
It'll all be good.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, they're kind of cool photos too. So I'd love to share them with you. But I particularly want you to see this shot of like the Dodo house in miniature.
Yeah.
I just find it kind of just I don't know. It's such a cool thing.
Amazing.
Yeah, and again, no one's doing that stuff anymore. Everything's computers. Everything's like done in post production, and to see the care that it took to make that kind of shot and honestly the whole movie to look as great as it does, and the work that went behind it, it's impressive. It's just everything about it is impressive.
Well, I'm again so grateful that people continue to enjoy it, and I'm thrilled that you both invited me to be part of this. I love. I mean, it's so exciting to talk to both of you about it, and I could keep going. So.
I know, us too.
Us
yes.
too. But we have taken up a lot of your time. So, Ken, what we do is we wrap up every episode with a set of questions. I have my own. Joe has his own. Being my week, I'll be reading mine out. Rapid fire as quick as you want. Expand if you like. Don't feel you have to. Question 1. What is a food that you hate?
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm a pescatarian, so I certainly don't like hamburgers anymore.
Fair enough. What is your go-to karaoke song?
Oh my gosh. Well, the last time I was forced to go to a karaoke bar, I was forced. I didn't have a choice, but my friends insisted that I sing the Aha song, "Take on Me."
I mean, it's a banger. It's a banger.
Oh, with those high notes,
no,
though, that's a
all
challenge.
it does is it keeps going higher and higher and higher and higher.
Yeah.
So I would say, is it my favorite? It's. I would say that I have wonderfully painful memories of trying to hit a few of those high notes.
If you're not going to hit those high notes, and halfway through the chorus that you're not going to hit it, and you're like, oh, I'm just going to have to go for it anyway. What is the sound of one hand clapping?
Oh my gosh, I was just thinking about that the other day. I think that the sound goes something like this. I'm sure you get that response from others.
Possibly.
What great podcast fodder. Hey, everyone, you want to hear some silence?
Pick a number between 1 and 250.
Oh, 16.
16. Okay, I have a list of 250 questions here. Let me go to number 16. What is your go-to guilty pleasure?
Oh my gosh, guilty pleasure. Well, I have to say, I among many guilty pleasures is I'm not sure it's a particularly guilty pleasure, but I do love watching films with Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis in them.
Great choice.
I'm not sure that even qualifies as a guilty pleasure anymore. So.
Just a pleasure.
Just a pleasure.
Yeah.
In our last episode, Bob McGrath, also in Follow That Bird, not knowing who our guest was going to be, wanted us to ask you, what are you doing in your life that you had no intention of doing?
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, the answer is, and I'm not sure I'm answering the right question, but I never in a bazillion years imagined that I would be directing the Muppets ever. So I coming out of film school, I certainly fancied myself a different sort of filmmaker entirely. And I think it was meeting Jim Henson for the first time, and the moment that Kermit introduced himself to me, that I realized that, I need to be part of this. I need to be part of this really magic thing.
You're not wrong.
And that
Joe and I have both had experiences getting to hang out with Muppets in real life, and it's something that you can't explain to people who haven't experienced it themselves.
Yeah, it wasn't like I was in Jim's office by accident. I was there to interview for a job. I knew what I was going in for, but I think I, imagined myself as a director of different kinds of things. And if somebody said, "You're going to direct a Sesame Street film," I would have laughed. But meeting Jim, being awed by him as a person, and then being sort of gobsmacked when Kermit started talking to me, I said, "Okay, I'm in. Please let me do this."
Finally, without knowing who it is, what question would you like our next guest to answer?
Oh my gosh, without knowing who it is. Well, if it's a puppeteer, wow, that's a great question. I would love to ask your next guest what Muppet film they would love to see be made.
Ooh, good one.
Is there a Muppet film that hasn't been made yet that they would love to see?
That's
I
a
love
great
it.
question.
That is a fantastic question.
I want to ask everybody that question. Ken, what Muppet film would you want to see be made? I hate to jump the gun for next week, but
no, I haven't really thought about it, but I do like the idea of another Sesame Street film focusing on one of the secondary characters in the group. I love the idea. I mean, I love the idea of a whole film about Oscar the Grouch. I mean, I think that audiences would
watch
really
that.
love a film about a really crotchety character, a real Ebenezer Scrooge character who who doesn't like kind people but loves broken toasters.
All right, let's pitch it.
Yeah.
Let's make it happen.
We'll
Exactly.
do it. Ken, thank you for, thank you. I mean, you've had an amazing career. Thank you for all the other stuff you've worked on, but thank you for Follow That Bird. What a film. One of the few 10 out of 10 movies in my books. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for talking to us. Your book, by the way, you mentioned it before, is called But What I Really Want to Do Is Direct. Lessons from a Life Behind the Camera. Like I said, they've been nice enough to send me a copy, so I've been going through it, and it's fantastic. Not just the Follow That Bird stuff, everything's fantastic. So thank you very much.
Well, again, I'm going to send you a few photos, and please, if you feel free to use them in any way you'd like. I think they're kind of fun.
Amazing.